weapons of every description. Among them, one that insidiously, surreptitiously caused irreparable damage during the First World War. Mustard gas. It burned the skin and caused irreversible damage to the lungs of anyone who had the misfortune of breathing it. People donned masks to escape its effects. They protected themselves as best they could against this highly dangerous substance developed as a result of research that subsequently yielded other toxic products, which have now become part of our day-to-day lives. I discovered beauty. I discovered my island. It was paradise for the Montrealer who settled in Prince Edward Island, willingly, freely, the way you surrender to a dream or give in to love. I had 2 children here. Then, when my son was hospitalized, the dream was shattered. He was 2 years old, and he was choking. I heard the diagnosis: a reaction to something in the air. I looked around me at the other children of the island, and I realized that many had the same ailment. Among them, Véronique, whose mother I met.
Tu couches ta belle petite fille, là, par exemple, pyjama toute chaude, puis toute emmaillotée, là, toute nigée dans son lit, puis tu sais, là, puis ensuite, tu vas dans ta chambre, puis là, tu commences à l'entendre tousser. Puis tu te couches même pas parce que tu restes assis dans ton lit, là. Tu sais, il faut que tu te lèves. Alors, tu l'entends tousser une couple de fois, puis tu penses, bon, peut-être que ça va pas commencer ce soir, peut-être que ça va se calmer, tu sais. Peut-être que ça soit pas une soirée comme les autres. On va peut-être dormir ce soir. Et puis on est là tous les deux, Michael et moi, puis t'es tellement tendu, puis tu dis rien, pensant peut-être qu'il dort, mais tu le sais qu'il dort pas lui non plus, qu'il est aussi tendu que toi, là, puis t'attends. Puis là, tous un petit brin plus, puis là, vers 3 heures du matin, là, ça débouche. Puis ça tousse, puis ça sonne comme si c'est son dernier souffle, elle va pas pouvoir le reprendre, tu sais, là. Puis tu te lèves, puis tu lui donnes, qu'est-ce que tu lui donnes? Tu sais pas quoi faire. Tu donnes de l'eau, tu frappes sur le dos, tu ouvres les fenêtres, tu fais tout ce que tu peux, qu'est-ce que tu as entendu, puis il n'y a rien qui marche. Tu voyais son visage, c'était gris, c'était pas une bonne couleur, les cernes sous les yeux, toujours fatiguée. En plus, Véronique, elle a subi tous les tests d'allergie. On a passé tout un après-midi avec elle. Elle se faisait piquer dans le dos, 60 petites piques dans le dos, puis ça lui faisait très, très mal, puis c'était très difficile. Alors, elle n'avait pas d'allergie. C'était un autre médecin qu'on avait été à une clinique un soir qui nous l'a dit, qui nous a prescrit une pompe.
À ce moment-là, tu as eu un choc?
Mm-hmm. Oui. On a pleuré ce soir-là.
Véronique was asthmatic. Hardly surprising. After all, Prince Edward Island has the highest rate of hospitalization for asthma in Canada. Something in the air. I had new concerns. Sharon Labchuk had them long before.
Would you like some information about PEI and your health while you're here? Thank you. Information about pesticides and your health while you're visiting the island?
Yeah, sure, thanks.
Well, I've always been interested in the pesticide issue, but it wasn't until I came back to the island and the spraying began to escalate that I started actually doing a lot of research into the issue. And what I found was very alarming.
Since food processing companies arrived, the acreage of land being farmed here has doubled. Potato fields take up more and more space on Prince Edward Island, the most densely populated province in the country. When you consider that it has 24 inhabitants per square kilometer, you quickly realize that these fields are encroaching on the living environment of the island residents. To obtain a product that meets market demand, farmers find themselves compelled to spray their fields with pesticides. This at a time when children are playing outside, in their yards, close to areas being sprayed day and night with toxic products. To drive home man's vulnerability to the poisons being poured into the fields, Sharon Lapchuk posed for this photograph. The picture caused quite a stir on the island, but I find her commitment a constant source of inspiration.
Would you like some information about the island? Pesticides in your health? Important health information.
Thank you.
You're welcome. 70 to 80% of what's sprayed on the island is classified by the American government as cancer-causing. And a little later, the whole issue of hormone-disrupting chemicals came to light, and we discovered that probably 70 to 80% of the pesticides sprayed on the island also are hormone disruptors. And, other things. Pesticides cause birth defects, decreased IQs in children, brain neurological damage, and of course we're all suspicious of the link to asthma on Prince Edward Island.
I wonder why there has to be so much spraying, and with such dangerous products. There must be other solutions.
We couldn't farm the acres that we farm here right now without pesticides or whatever. Or the A2 blight that we now have here on the island would simply devastate our crop without the use of fungicides. And the Colorado potato beetle would simply just wipe our crop out.
Born into a farming family, Danny Hendricken answered quite candidly, willingly sharing his thoughts on this issue. He himself questions the type of farming going on today. He's very open about it.
We just didn't simply get to this situation we're in right now overnight. This has been a long time coming, for 30 years or whatever. So you get people that have moved maybe 1 and 2 generations away from the land, and they've lost touch really with what's happening. And all of a sudden now they're becoming alarmed about the amount of sprays and chemicals that are being used on the farms. But this is what happened over the last 20 years.
There was a time when every type of product was being grown here. Controlling insects, weeds, and disease was then a natural process resulting from the agricultural diversity. But by the late 60s, potatoes had become the main crop. This monoculture was more vulnerable to attack. Amidst talk of efficiency, insects multiplied. The role of farmers was changing, generating a need for pesticides.
Society has changed. Now you have farmers that are beholden to corporations. They've become slaves to corporate masters. People are afraid to talk about pesticides because many of them have connections to the potato industry. No matter how tenuous they are, they're afraid to talk. because they may be punished. They may lose, be punished economically because these large corporations do dominate the economic picture on the island.
After the Second World War, that's when really chemical agriculture really took off, kind of in what they call the Green Revolution. Whereas chemical fertilizer, insecticides, fungicides would allow you to produce greater and greater volumes of different produce. People think that the farmers are co-conspirators in that, because of their own personal greed to get richer and to produce more and more, then they've had to, use more chemicals. And farmers are caught up into kind of a cheap food policy that's not only represented by our federal government, but also, of course, the government of the United States and a lot of the free world. And what they want to do is to see food produced as cheaply as it can possibly be produced. And what they thought, well, how we'll do that is we'll use high rates of chemical to control anything from weeds to insects to funguses, with little or no, realization of the ramifications that the use of these chemicals would have on our ecology of this planet. And farmers, in the name of this cheap food policy, pushed forward by, the governments of the United States and Canada, have been doing exactly what's been asked of them.
Of course, the government imposed regulations making it illegal, for instance, to spread pesticides when winds exceed 25 kilometers an hour. Yet it was a windy day when a farmer sprayed his crop adjacent to this soccer field where children were playing.
Veux-tu peser dessus toi-même? OK, une fois. Compte.
C'est très populaire. C'est très populaire, les pompes. C'est presque normal, ça fait partie de notre vie maintenant. Tu vois ça partout, les enfants à jouer au soccer, puis les enfants toutes les pompes avant de commencer à jouer.
To spray or not to spray? Yes, there are regulations, but only 6 inspectors to enforce them across the entire island.
It's pretty hard when you know that you have an infestation or probability of blight for your crop, and your crop is worth thousands and thousands of dollars, and you could maybe lose that if not sprayed. And then that's a hard call to make, because farmers say, listen, I have to spray. And then on the other coin, you have the pesticide police saying, sorry, the law says you're not allowed, and that's it. And if you would say if it stayed windy for long enough, you could lose that field. And there's little or no compensation there. There's no compensation for farmers that loses this crop due to weather conditions that wouldn't allow him or permit him to spray.
Summer is the most dangerous time of all to be on Prince Edward Island. The spraying, of course, in July and August when people are outside and when tourists are visiting is very intense. There can be spraying every 4 days during certain parts of the summer. So there's no escaping the spray in the air that we're breathing.
Au début, c'était juste une pompe bleue. Et puis après ça, c'était 2 pompes, une pompe bleue, une pompe brune. Après un bout de temps, c'était le masque. J'avais vraiment de la difficulté avec ça, tous ces médicaments-là de son système. C'était juste une petite fille, puis elle prenait plus de médicaments que nous autres, on prenait comme adultes. Alors, j'avais de la difficulté avec ça. J'aimerais pouvoir voir dans son petit corps, là, tu sais, puis voir est-ce que ça fait du bien ou est-ce qu'on lui fait du tort.
For a brief moment, I imagine that they've stopped spraying toxic products on potato fields. But I know full well that the spraying of pesticides will continue, especially on golf courses that have to be greener and greener to meet the demands of the tourist industry. And how do you keep residents from spraying their lawns?
Je voyage assez souvent pour mon emploi, OK? Et puis les gens, ils disent d'où viens-tu? D'où viens-tu? D'où viens-tu? Puis, non, je viens de l'île du Prince-Édouard. Ah, t'es chanceuse, l'île du Prince-Édouard. C'est tellement beau. Puis si tu restes ici, tu vois que c'est pas si beau que ça. On se demande qu'est-ce qui va arriver à nos enfants. Qu'est-ce qui va arriver s'ils continuent avec tous ces pesticides-là? Qu'est-ce qu'on laisse à nos enfants? Qu'est-ce que si Véronique et Daniel choisissent de rester sur l'île? Et puis, crois-moi, je ne l'encourage pas du tout. Moi, je leur dis à chaque jour, aussitôt que vous avez gradué, vous allez partir de l'île. Hein. Vous allez sortir de l'île. Parce que c'est épeurant de penser qu'eux autres, ils pourraient rester à l'île, avoir des enfants qui seraient encore plus malades que Véronique l'était. C'est pas réel, ce paradis ici qu'on voit, là. Il n'y a pas de problème avec Véronique quand on part de l'île. C'est qu'on revient.
Ordinary everyday people have changed a lot too. I mean, they're all very fearful of what's happening to their health and to the health of their families because of the intensity of the sprays. The sprays are all around. Anybody that lives in town or the country is going to be exposed to pesticide spray on PEI.
The stories I hear about different people really get me thinking. People like Jane, a mother who, like me, moved to Prince Edward Island. She sank all her savings into a piece of land that reminded her of her childhood in New Brunswick. With a pretty house surrounded by potato fields, she started raising goats. Then one July day, Jane and her son heard the sound of a tractor and went out to have a look. Through the cloud of pesticides that swept over their property, they spotted the neighboring farmer spraying his fields. They quickly moved the goats indoors, but all had been sprayed. Within weeks, the goats fell ill and had to be put down. Then Jane's own health and that of her son began to deteriorate. The house was contaminated. They abandoned it 4 years ago. Jane never returned. The effects of pesticides are not immediate. The repercussions can be felt weeks, even months after spraying. When you are exposed to these hazards on a daily basis, do you still instinctively think of protecting yourself?
We don't wear any protective gear whatsoever. We have like the newer tractors have charcoal filters in them. Sure, you're protected when you're on the tractor, but if something happens, your sprayer nozzles, whether you have to get out and change them or clean them, then I'm afraid that there's gloves and other equipment you can wear which are very hot, very cumbersome, and they're disregarded. I would say that realistically, I would say 90% of the farmers do not wear any protective wood gear. Maybe it's just the luck of God himself that none of our family ever has been, sick because of use of those chemicals.
Children are those most sensitive to pesticides. Pound for pound, they eat more, drink more, and breathe in more than adults. In fact, pesticides are the second leading cause of poisoning among the young.
We are not an industrial province, so we don't have high rates of local pollution. We are getting measurements beginning this year of air quality in the outdoors, which will give us an idea as to whether or not pollution is coming in from outside. As far as the cause in the province, as to why we have a high rate, or higher than the rest of the country for hospital admissions, we don't know what the cause is. I think that it's good to be aware of the fact that there's pesticides being sprayed in the area. I believe that there is a good knowledge of the potential problems of pesticides in the province. Certainly a prevention program would be of help.
Horse, horse.
People need to be concerned about their environment, not only their personal environment, but the larger global environment, because pesticides are all around us. And people need to be aware that these poisons are around and to take precautions to protect themselves, but also to become engaged in the issue to get rid of these poisons from our lives and from the planet. People who effect change. It won't come from above. It's not going to come from politicians, and it's certainly not going to come from the corporations that are destroying the planet.
We're not going to be able to reverse this trend overnight, and I think only by, the consumers and the general population and governments, provincial and federal, working together. Maybe we can start to change around agriculture so that we're growing our food in a more kind of environmentally and sustainable manner.
Michael et moi, on travaille tous les deux pour Anciens combattants. L'emploi est ici, mais on cherche toujours quelque chose d'autre. On aime beaucoup ça, l'île. C'est une bonne place pour élever les enfants. C'est très beau, c'est plutôt sécuritaire. J'aime beaucoup l'école où ils vont, c'est une petite école. Il y a tellement de choses, mais il y a toujours ça. Qu'est-ce que le dommage qu'on est en train de faire à Véronique, là?
Today, my son is better, but I no longer see the children of the island in the same way. I'm afraid for them. The accumulation of toxic products in their bodies can have all kinds of consequences that are bound to crop up sooner or later. But nothing is being said about the something in the air that targets the most vulnerable among us. What kind of human disaster are we waiting for before we do something about it?